Good evening, and welcome to tonight's segment of MOBE Mondays. Thank you to all of those that have joined us for nearly 75 segments of MOBE Mondays, and to those of you new to our MOBE platform, we're so excited to have you. As a matter of background, MOBE is Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment, and it's a conference series that was created 30 years ago to be successful in creating a Black business model for professionals focused on accelerating success in the areas of business that are not always open to us, and certainly where everyone within the MOBE Business Network can win, not only from case studies and the excellence and generous sharing of information by industry leaders in marketing, business, entertainment, technology, and sports. We've measured over $200 million in business deals that have been initiated between MOBE registrants within the first 10 years alone. Our strength has been measuring the business that we steer to our registrants. And 2 years ago, we started this MOBE Symposium platform so that we can very proudly, in our 30th year, celebrate. Tonight, we have Kilolo Moyo-White leading, and she launched our independent education narrative, or our MOBE Ed, to address the critical need for our Black children to be culturally grounded, for our audience of marketers and entrepreneurs to consider that achievement grows from solid grounding rooted in history and purpose. Today, we have all HBCU grads. I am Yvonne Orr, the board secretary for Real Men Charities that leads the MOBE Symposium, and also a proud HBCU grad of Hampton University. I'm sure our panelists and moderator will do their shout outs later, but since I'm first, go Hampton. Today, we have these education innovators that will provide insights, case studies, and opportunities as we begin a new school year and culturally competent education. Let the conversation begin with Kilolo Moyo-White, who is a proud HBCU graduate of Lincoln University of Pennsylvania and Temple University with a master's in African American Studies. She is the founder and CEO of TeachAkoma LLC, an education consultant agency that is committed to producing anti-racist curriculum and designing educational learning experiences to amplify the message, teach from the heart. Kilolo is the newest addition to the MOBE Symposium, which stands for Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment. And she's a part of our steering committee, having led the design and implementation of independent education narratives, HBCUs, and beyond. It's a conference that was powered by MOBE Symposium this past April, to the wonderful attendance of nearly 17,000 that streamed and over 2,500 participants live. We love our HBCUs, and we're grateful for this opportunity to hear from some primary Black education innovators. Kilolo, take it away.
Thanks so much, Yvonne. We really appreciate that. So I'm so excited to be your host today and introduce this amazing, wonderful panel of really who I call my sisters and my brothers. So I'm going to start with Brandon Corley, who is the founding executive director of the Earl Monroe New Renaissance Basketball School, a school created to support student pathways to careers in every role in the basketball ecosystem. Previous to joining the Earl Monroe New Renaissance Basketball School, he was the co-founder and academic director for the South Bronx Community Charter High School. Brandon has worked with the Children's Defense Fund Freedom Schools program since 2004 in various capacities. He is a graduate of Chicago State University with a BS in mathematics, secondary education, and earned a master's in educational leadership from Birch College. So thank you, Brandon, for being here. Our next guest is Kellie Brown. She is the CEO and founder of Spread Karma, a fundraising ecosystem for social impact causes. Since launching Spread Karma, the organization has helped raise over $150,000 for social impact causes in education, youth development, and beyond. She also currently serves as the manager of Title I funding for Baltimore City Public Schools. She earned her master's degree in business administration from the University of Baltimore, but she is also a very proud graduate of Howard and mm, and the University of Baltimore undergrad. Thank you, Kellie, for being here with us. And last but not least, certainly, and I'm not sure if we're supposed to put like an honorable or something like that in front of this brother's name, but council member at large, Isaiah Thomas, for the city of Philadelphia. Throughout his career, Isaiah has worked in the nonprofit, public, and private sectors in positions that impact the important issues of our that our city faces, including the creation of his nonprofit organization, the Thomas and Woods Foundation, which provides free summer programs for youth 6 to 16 years old, and with the introduction of historic legislation like the driving equity bill, which I'm sure he'll talk about, as well as the Black Workers Matter package and local procurement bill. He has shown his passion for addressing the real issues of Philadelphia citizens. Isaiah has a bachelor's, a BA from Penn State Abington, and a master's of education from the Lincoln University. And so I am so proud and honored to have you all with me tonight. So thank you and welcome. We are going to start this conversation with each of you, and I guess we'll start with Brandon, and we can go just in order. And what I'd like you to do is reintroduce yourself, but say what you are most passionate about in the field of education. So you don't have to repeat like all of the details of what I shared, but how do you want to introduce yourself, and what are you most passionate about in the field of education? So we're going to start with Brandon.
Got you, got you. Thank you, Kilolo, for having me here. Thank you to the MOBE team. I really appreciate all of the work that you all are doing on behalf of Black-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses at large. When it comes to education, I think my passions really lie in two spaces. One is in school design. So I was a member of the Expanded Success Initiative's School Design Fellowship. I got to work with some really great people in New York City, where we designed a high school model to better prepare Black and Latino males for college and career success. And so we were able to launch 4 schools. We have 3 DOE schools and a charter school, and we experienced great success in those places. And at every turn, it was always thinking about how do we build institutions that support us? How do we make sure that the programs that are in place are thoughtful about what it is and the particular needs that young men of color have and young women of color bring to the table that their peers from different cultural backgrounds may not have to deal with. And so really trying to make sure that these places are putting us at the forefront. It's the whole FUBU mindset, for us, by us, ensuring that we get what it is that we need. In addition to that, I really am passionate about seeing more male teachers of color into the classroom. I think this passion first started a long time ago when I was an undergrad. While I was an undergrad, a lot of the work that my fraternity did was in mentoring. And, I have to take a moment to shout out Phi Rho Eta Fraternity Incorporated. Today is our Founders Day. Shout out to Marvin Vincent Randolph and Lamont Theolonis Brown Taylor for founding Phi Rho Eta 28 years ago. But one of the things that they were really big on was mentoring and ensuring that we got in front of young people so that we can show them role models and show them real life models on how you can go and navigate through different spaces. And so we had a mentoring program where we went into high schools every week to be able to be a presence that was missing from a lot of schools. And often when I went to schools as an undergrad to try to make these connections, the thing that they would say is, we don't have too many teachers that look like you. And so they would embrace our program. And it really got me thinking about what are the reasons why there are so few male teachers of color. And so, I've been spending a long time, spent some time with NYC Men Teach, which is one of the largest organizations in the country that is looking to recruit and retain male teachers of color. And everything that I do from a school level, always trying to give back and trying to make way for young brothers that look like me to have a space to come teach young brothers that look like me. And so, those are my big passions. And I'm also, I'll say, the best basketball coach on this call, but I'll leave that for a later conversation.
Thanks, Brandon. Go ahead, Kelly, because I don't want Isaiah to try to get in there with that.
I'll be the middle person. Well, thank you. Also, thank you, MOBE Ed and Sister Kilolo for the invitation to this panel. And I'm really excited to be here alongside my Freedom School family. So yes, my name is Kellie Brown. I am a business management professional overall. In a nutshell, of all you mentioned, founder and CEO of Spread Karma, which is a social impact fundraising platform and ecosystem. And it really explains that particular entity explains my passion as a whole, because I am, like, as Brandon said, he's interested in like school design. I'm very passionate about school funding and where and how school funding can be leveraged from community partnerships, stakeholders, and then how we use those resources, that funding, to measure impact, to create impact in our schools, whether it's a charter, a private school, or public schools. And so my passion is really around, at this stage, right, for within the last 5 years, it's around how funding will impact the education system on all facets, whether it's private or public. And currently in my current role as a manager of federal programs. So I manage it's a $65 million federal grant that most of us know as Title I funding. And I oversee that spending for Baltimore City's public school district, right? This huge school district in the middle of Maryland, where we are always talking about low performing schools, how the poverty rate within Baltimore City. And then we receive this massive grant. We probably get some of the most federal funding, and really trying to understand and track that impact is where I'm most interested in. So I take that skill, what I'm doing right now for Baltimore City, but also in every area, whether it's a small school, one-on-one, whether it's a program like a nonprofit organization who needs some funding to leverage, to create some impact. I'm really interested in managing the fiscal management of grants or private funding, and seeing how we do with that funding, right? And also who receive the funding, looking at it from an equity lens, and how the track record looks from year after year around some of the programs that we put in place. And so that's a big passion of mine now. And I'll just quickly say, with Spread Karma, that private entity that I founded and now is thriving on its own, I'm really also interested in teaching people how to fundraise outside of grants. Okay, so most of us have a nonprofit or know a nonprofit leader who is definitely seeking grants to raise money or to bring money in for your organization. Through experience and leveraging resources, I strongly believe and advocate also for this idea of leveraging your community. Crowdfunding is what most people call it. And so Spread Karma has a crowdfunding component to it, where you leverage your crowd. We call them your comrades. But that community of donors is going to really help you become sustainable in the long run. And not everyone can knock on the door of a foundation or a city agency to get grant funding. And so I'm really interested in teaching people how to go ahead and get your community of donors or supporters as your own, whether it's just a starting point or whether at some stage in your trajectory. And so that's Kelly as a spiel. And I look forward to talking more about that journey and how it relates to education.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kelly. And just looking at you, honestly, there's no way that I would even thought that you had all those things that you were working on, right? And I just want to also elevate that. I've known Kellie since she was in ninth grade. I was one of her teachers, and she was my first junior servant leader. And so Freedom School is definitely what binds each of us on this call. And that has also sustained such a deep, passionate relationship, I think, from all of us, right? And so I want Brother Isaiah to go ahead and reintroduce himself, especially because you started off as a Freedom School person and now you're a policymaker. And to like just talk about that journey also, if you can, within what you're passionate about in education.
Yeah, I'll be brief. First of all, everybody know I love them deeply for a lot of different reasons. It's always a pleasure to be here. Just feel like I'm in the living room talking with you guys. I mean, the politics side is simple, right? Like we all know, the words of Bayard Rustin and talked about the concept of transitioning from protest to politics. And at the end of the day, we need folks on all sides. And I consider myself somebody who's an advocate for poor people, people of color. I'm unapologetic about my advocacy for Black folks as an elected official. And I think that my decision making and how I move and what I advocate for and how I vote is really grounded in my work in freedom schools and this concept of what it means to be a servant leader. And I think a lot of us outside of just freedom schools, because a lot of people go through freedom schools, I think what else we have in common is we've all embodied the concept of servant leadership. And we feel like we're called to serve, to help, to educate, to mentor, to do what we can to help our children. And so, of course, it's an honor to be here. I think when I think about your question around education and what I care about, I think the foundational things for me are climate, culture, and curriculum, as well as extracurricular activities. And I couldn't be a legislator and not talk about the funding side. I think when I think about all of those things, it comes under the gamut of equity. So if I had to pick one thing that I really care about as it relates to education in the city of Philadelphia, it would be the idea that no matter where you live, what part of the city, no matter what neighborhood, you should have the opportunity to have access to a quality education. And the irony is I might be the only one in Philadelphia right now, but I think at some point, all of you have lived in Philadelphia, and you know firsthand that that is not the case for us in the city of Philadelphia. Actually, in far too many neighborhoods, you really don't have much of a chance if you're relying on the schools that are in your community. And so that's my biggest fight. And when you break those things down, it breaks down to a lot of different levels. Some of the things I talked about, again, climate, culture, curriculum, funding, extracurricular activities, those are the things that are at the top of my list. But overall, it's equity. It's making sure that everybody has access to a quality education. And I think that's my obligation as a council member at large who's on the education committee, who comes from education space, and who still actively coaches in the public league. So, I don't know how Brandon is the best coach on the call when he's not even coaching. That's like me being the best soccer player. But I guess in today's era, anybody could be anything they want to be. So, Brandon, kudos to you. Continue to be all you can be. And I'm proud of you, Coach.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Z.
I love how we can easily just kind of slide in the jabs, right? So flawlessly. So thank you, Brother Isaiah. So which leads us into our next question, which kind of like each of you talked in some way about funding, and accessing funding or resources, right, to support the innovation of how we need to address the challenges that are in our schools, in our communities. And so I'd like for each of you to talk about the ways in which either your school that you're working at for Brandon, and the institution that you're in, how do they intentionally look at innovating, right? And using, what are the skills or the tools that they're using to be innovative within the classroom? And of course, with Kellie, maybe not in the classroom, but definitely I want you to talk more about your platform with Spread Karma. I remember when you started way back when, and you were selling karma beads, right? And so you started off as this like budding entrepreneur, being creative and taking your skills, right, and putting that love into something and passing it on. And so I love how that has morphed and blossomed into this amazing ecosystem of teaching people about in our communities about crowdsourcing and funding, and that's so important. And then, of course, with Isaiah, with policy, how are you being creative and innovative? I'm seeing it all over the internet. But talk to us more about the ways that you're using your platforms and policy making to be innovative in the schools. So, Brandon, can you start us?
Yeah, so the Earl Monroe New Renaissance Basketball School is a school, the first of its kind. We're doing something that has never been done before, where we're looking at how we can prepare students for different roles within the basketball ecosystem. You have a lot of schools that are basketball powerhouses. You have Oak Hill Academy, IMG in Florida, schools that are, you know, created to recruit the top athletes to prepare them for professional playing. But far too often, there isn't anything done to prepare them for what happens outside of life on the court or on the field. It's just, how can we maximize your athletic abilities? How can we train you so that you can get the most from a performance standpoint? At Earl Monroe New Renaissance Basketball School, the actual playing of basketball is secondary. We will have one of the best basketball teams in the city, but more importantly, we want to make sure that our students are prepared to enter any basketball career path, whether that's journalism, whether that's physical therapy, in arena entertainment, social media, all of these different things. And so in order for that to happen, you have to have a lot of resources. We're fortunate enough to be in, the largest city in the country that has a love of basketball that is very unique to New York. One of the things that I've learned since I've been here is that the way and the approach to basketball is very different than you'll see in many places. Similar to what you get in Philly, similar to what you get in Chicago, in big markets like that, where it's an urban game. You don't have to have much in order to be able to fall in love with basketball. You really just need to go to the park. It's not a game like baseball or golf where you have to invest all of this extra money into the equipment in order to be able to play. And so basketball is an accessible sport that a lot of young people love, but don't always think about how you can grow into different career fields. And so what we're doing at Earl Monroe is really being intentional about that. And so, our ninth graders take a basketball foundations class where they begin to be exposed to all of the different career paths, or some of the different career paths that exist within the sport. And then from there, we continue to think about what your major could be, in a sense. And so if you're thinking that journalism is something that you want to be a part of, then we will, we'll introduce our journalism class. We're going to, over time, introduce a school newspaper that's going to be funded by some big name donors. I don't know if I'm at liberty to say, so I don't want to get myself in trouble. I've only been on the job for 3 weeks, so I'm not going to name drop too much, but some very powerful people behind our journalism program, and I'm very much excited about what our school newspaper is going to grow it to be. We have a one-to-one mentoring program in-house where we're connecting all of our young people with folks that are in professional careers so that they can begin to get that professional exposure and that professional advice on how it is that you can handle yourself and be exposed to what the working situations are for our young folks. From an athletic standpoint, we are a school that was built out of a program called the New York Wrens, a AAU basketball program, who has a long-standing reputation for doing great things in the community, again, both in and off the court, and are very active in social action activities. And so one of the things that we are really proud of on our school uniform, there's a orange emblem for anti-gun violence that exists for all of our students. When you come to our school, you'll see a logo that is showing support for students in Ukraine. And so, we are not a school, again, that is just about the playing of the sport. We are not the place where you're just going to shut up and dribble. Like, we are building young people to be active in their professions and active in their communities, and to be able to use their talents to leverage change in many different ways. And so just very, very, very excited about the different things that are coming, and the opportunities that we can prepare students for. Things like New York State has a graduation pathway called CDOS, which is Career Development and Occupational Studies. And so we're looking at how we can build in coursework and internship opportunities, so that as our students matriculate, then they can be able to be on this pathway towards towards a career plan, so that as they leave us, they can say, all right, if college is where they're going, this is why they're going to college, and this is the reason that they made the decision to the school that they're attending. If they want to enter the workforce, then these are the places that they will be best suited to earn a living wage now. And these are the skills that they've developed in order to thrive in those spaces. So just very excited about what's coming at Earl Monroe New Renaissance Basketball School. It's a prominent school, but it's going to continue to grow and be more and more. And so just really, really thankful to be a part of this team.
Yes, and you can tell that you are new on the job because you have totally memorized all of the important information that everybody needs to know. I love it. Do your job. Yes. Let's go ahead and move on to Kellie Brown.
Oh, Brandon, that was great. Yeah, I know a lot more about the school, and I'm just really excited. I hope I can get the support. That's awesome. So in terms of innovation, I think I'm going to really touch on some things that you talked about, Brandon, because when it comes to an innovative approach to this education system, you have to, like you said, you have to leverage your community, other stakeholders beyond just, the teachers, right, at that school. And when you mentioned a one-on-one mentorship program for your students, that's the type of stuff that I would recommend. And I was going to speak about is leveraging your community to get, to create that goal that you have for your school at a school level, because right now, like I said, at like this district level, where I see a lot of like the district wide approach to things a lot of times, but at a school level, it is like working directly with the school leaders to see how you can leverage the immediate community, like within that radius of where the school sits. But then beyond that, like you said, some pretty major partnerships can come through your school. I just believe that if we're going to do something innovative, we need to go back to that model of it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that is not something that we heard and just no one believed in. Everybody will say they believe in it to this day, but how are we really putting that into practice? And it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to actually run a school and make impact, like reading levels, math levels, social engagement, anything, social emotional learning. All of those things does not just begin and end with the teacher, right? It definitely starts at home, but then beyond that, we have to leverage our community and resources and partnerships. So that's just one part of this conversation that I was going to touch on, because I could definitely, Sister Kilolo, just talk about different ways to be innovative from a district level. And like I said, working with funding and looking at the fiscal, like management of grants, I'm looking at this evidence approach to things. In order to be innovative at that level, we need to understand data and what does research show about every program that comes into a school. We call it ESSA, stands for Every Student Succeeds Act. And in that act, there's different tiers that will show or support how we spend our dollars, right? If it's tier 1, then that's something that was evidence-backed, like evidence-based backed theory or initiative that we all, there were studies on it and that it created impact. So we can easily put our dollars and funding towards that. Now, if it's ESSA4 level, where there may not be research there to show, but it's something innovative that we all, let's say Brandon, like you have something really innovative that you're doing. We may not necessarily know the long-term effect or the data to show, right, how what you're doing is actually going to impact student achievement. But and you may or may not, but if you didn't, that's a chance right there that we can still put federal funding to, or private funding to. So from this particular question that you're asking, Sister Kilolo, around innovation and education, I think we need to leverage our community partnerships. I just, even from what Brandon is saying and from the work that I'm doing with Spread Karma, if we can't leverage our community, this village that we keep talking about, and we know there used to be, or there's some feeling of it around, like freedom schools had this village, you know, we're all family. We have to get back to that if we really truly do want to see our students succeed. And so I'm pushing for that on all levels, fiscally and then like programmatically as well.
Thanks so much, Kelly. I know in the chat, we have some questions from YouTube. And so, Isaiah, as you begin to talk about and share some of the ways that you're being innovative with policy as a policymaker, can you also talk about, well, one, I want everybody to, in the chat, we want to put, how can people support our work, right, that we're doing? So each of us, if we want to put that into the chat so that can get shared out for the school as well as Spread Karma. And then Isaiah, you can definitely talk about that. Go ahead.
Sure. I think for me, most of my innovation is ideas and hasn't been actually actualized. And I think for me, my approach is to try to fill holes, right? Like, so in the first part, I talked about equity, and it's piece by piece. And at the end of the day, a lot of the things that I talked about in the space of education from the perspective of a legislator, we really can't, I believe we really can't do with the structure that we have right now. So one of the innovative solutions that I've been advocating for as it relates to the structure of our schools and how we operate our schools is what we call a hybrid school board. I don't think that a mayoral appointed board is the ideal way to govern our schools. I also think that there should be a full-time job with the salary and benefits in the city of Philadelphia is actually a voluntary position, which to me puts us in a position where accountability is very difficult. While these folks are appointed by the mayor, once they're there, the process for getting rid of someone is something that I haven't seen since we've returned to a local control. And so while I am a fan of local control, I think that we need our school board members to have more skin in the game, in a sense where as though the folks who do it right now, they have full-time jobs, they have families and other obligations. I think that the crisis that we're facing right now requires a different structure as it relates to how our schools are governed. So, I have an innovative idea around school governance that I think will really put us in a position to change how the infrastructure of our schools are and what accountability looks like. The innovation comes from partly lived experiences, but also partly exploring what other people do. I think that there's some level of a compliment to replicating things that already work. So sometimes the best idea isn't the one you think of, it's the one that is already in existence that applies to somebody else. So at the end of the day, I think for us, innovation and legislation it ends with lived experiences, but those lived experiences often put us in a position to be able to identify problems that exist in different aspects of what I'm in charge of, which is government. I know you guys are more of a societal perspective of solution, especially as folks who are practitioners in the classroom that's responsible for the entire gamut. But I've kind of, I still have that perspective in the work I do as a coach. But my everyday life is kind of transitioned into more of a infrastructure and governance perspective. So I'm often thinking about big picture things like how can we, fix funding? What does accountability look like for how our schools are governed? What can we do to put us in our position to be able to have more partnerships, to be able to allow some of our community-based organizations to use some of our facilities? We have a lot of structural problems that put us in a position where in a time where we see more crime than in recent history that are involving children, we see less free programs than what we've ever seen, less access to YMCAs and Salvation Armies and POW centers and local schools. Right? Our parks and recs actually do a good job, but most of our other partners are either struggling from a fiscal perspective or cost too much for a lot of our grassroots folks to essentially get access to. So we're stuck with a lot of these systematic problems that has created a perfect whirlwind of some level of, I would call chaos as it relates to what we do and the type of services and resources that we offer to children in the city of Philadelphia. Here's a total side note. I'll give y'all a great example, something y'all can all relate to. Maybe not you as much, Brandon, but PYN, right? They just did an article on PYN talking about how they fumble yet again as it relates to partners for to provide employers, providing young people with paychecks and other issues like that. And let's be honest, none of us are surprised, right? But the problem is that when you have something like that happen in the midst of all young people are facing right now, we should be giving young people every opportunity to work or to be a part of an extracurricular activity. We can't be living in an era where on one level we're saying this is the great resignation, nobody wants to work. Then we have all these teenagers and young people who want to get some level of access to employment because maybe they're not necessarily interested in an extracurricular activity, and some type of fiscal stability is a little better for them, but yet they're also denied. So those are some of the conflicting interests that kind of puts us in a position in city of Philadelphia where we could talk about what we advocate for that's innovative, but what we've actualized is actually very little. So I'm not necessarily proud of the lack of innovation as it relates to what we're doing, and I know I have a lot of work to do to put us in a position. So hopefully the next time you guys invite me to have this conversation, I can talk about some actual tangible outcomes instead of ideas and things that we're advocating for.
No, I love what you were just sharing though, Isaiah. Because you actually elevated this idea. Because another question in the chat was looking at some of those prominent challenges, right? And so you kind of just talked about that, but I'm going to actually go back to Isaiah so we can go back around because we're like about 30 minutes through. And so, but I want Isaiah, because you didn't elevate, how can people support the policies and the work that you're doing? And so I want you to get an opportunity to maybe share that, or at least maybe share with our audience, what should people be focusing on, right? How can we, as individual community members, parents, teachers, advocates, what is it that we should be doing to support or kind of centering our attention on and focusing on these?
Are we in a nonprofit space? Because I think my answer should be different. Are we in a nonprofit space? I don't want to jeopardize anybody's. Okay. So thinking about the fact that we're in like a nonprofit space, right? The first thing I'll say is, as far as supporting me specifically, if that's something that you're actually interested in, there are a lot of things that you could do. I'm limited in what I can say that you can do on a certain level because we're on a nonprofit platform. So I'll make sure I put my social media handle as well as my email in the chat feature so people can reach out to me to be able to have more of an in-depth conversation on how folks can support me if they want to, because it will be greatly appreciated and is definitely needed. What you can do to support legislatively, right? It's a lot. First and foremost, people who are not necessarily for the type of folks that we advocate for on this call, which is often poor people and people of color, especially Black folks, they're very active as it relates to their disapproval. If you have time one day, you should just go on my Twitter and just look at some of the comments and mentions, not my personal one, my city council one. Kilolo, it's going to make you want to fight somebody. So you actually shouldn't. But for those of us, she's very protective of me. I'm like little brother. But like some of the things you're going to see, it's like it's 100% off brand, out of character, disrespectful, name calling. I mean, it's gotten even bad that people actually make memes about me and they have watermarks on it. So like, think about the fact that this person wants, like, you talk about innovation, right? Like they want creative control of the meme that they make to troll me. Like I'm almost honored, right? Like that you actually took the time to put a watermark on it and you didn't just like make the meme. So that's how in depth it goes. And I think the reason that I bring it up is because when you're on this side as elected official, often the people we fight for are voiceless. And sometimes it's by choice because of access to resources, but also sometimes it's by lack of participating. A lot of folks don't believe in politics. A lot of folks don't believe in government. And whether you're Democrat or Republican or independent, the one thing I do know is that politics is going to impact your life no matter what, if you decide to participate or not. Your vote or lack thereof is a choice, and it's a voice. And often that decision is made based on influences that you're necessarily not always aware of. So if there is an elected official or a politician or some legislation that you agree with, email that person. Tell them you agree with them. Post it on social media. Share it with your friends in a group text. Make people aware that this person exists. They're willing to fight for the things that you're willing to fight for, and give them those tangible examples of why you're advocating for this person, especially if it's a bill that they've passed that you feel passionate about. Also, to be honest with you, it inspires us and keeps us going. As elected officials, we respond to the constituency that's the most loudest. You absolutely have to. Even if you disagree with them, you respond to them and tell them you disagree. And at the end of the day, I think far too often our voice and our perspective is not at the table, not because we don't always have representation. That's definitely a part of the problem. But another part of the problem is we don't communicate it because we've become so dissolved that we think nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to happen. My voice won't make a difference. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So at the end of the day, please support your elected officials, support legislation, post it, tweet it, let folks know it exists. And at the end of the day, if you're an education advocate, know that a big part of your success or lack thereof is predicated on the decisions that elected officials make. So if you think that it doesn't make a difference and make a difference for teachers, for students, for parents, for community organizations, and for anybody who has stake in their neighborhood and their community, and if you have children, of course, firsthand this directly impacts you.
Wow, that was really powerful, and I'm really proud of you. And yes, I am very protective over all of my brothers and sisters, everybody on this call in particular. But I also love the fact that when folks talking about you, it's because you're doing something right, and you're doing something powerful, and you're doing something that is transformative and that is impacting our children and our communities. And so I just want to thank you for the continued service that you bring to our community members and to the nation, because you've been even on a national platform. So that's okay. Let them keep talking. Go ahead, Kelly. How would you respond to this question? We're talking about these challenges, but I also want you to talk about HBCUs, right? Because we can also leverage our assets of each other. And I don't think we talk about that platform enough. But one of the ways in which I made sure that with MOBE ED and the innovation of the independent education narrative, I made sure that was the first thing I did. I reached out to my brothers and sisters from HBCUs, right? So Kelly's been to a HBCU. Isaiah went to Lincoln following after his big sister, even though we didn't know each other, but it's okay. But it was right after that we did know each other. And so just wanted you to get a chance to kind of chime in there and talk about leveraging those types of assets with HBCUs.
Yeah, I think what Isaiah was just talking about. First of all, I just gotta say thank you, brother Isaiah, Zeke. We really appreciate the work you're doing, right? And I'm also protective, so I'm not gonna go on your Twitter either. But I just want to let you know you're doing a great job nationally in the city. Like I've been watching, and I really appreciate the work you're doing, particularly for, like you said, people of color in Philly. I think we're all born and raised right in Philly. So Brandon, I'm not sure if you are, but if at the end, okay, all right. Well, what I would say is me being born and raised, and actually growing up, and Zeke being a part of my teenage years, I just appreciate the progress that you've been making. In terms of HBCUs and how we can leverage them, the graduates, I am a big fan, like I keep saying, of like the funding and how we can leverage our community and then create impact. And so I want to create a vision, and something innovative is this giving community, like with us as young professionals. We graduates, we're in professional fields. We're hopefully at this stage in our lives, if you did attend HBCU, you got in a career, you may be making, some funding, some a salary where you could afford to give, right? monthly, yearly, to some cause that you care about, that we care about. And I keep mentioning, right, this collective impact, or how it takes a village. And so for me, I would be so interested in creating a giving circle with all the HBCUs, right on Spread Karma's platform. I'm gonna put that plug in there because we are giving platform. We connect resources. We vet all of the needs. Like, so in our platform, when you create a campaign or you start a project, we vet it. We make sure. That's one difference from us and other crowdfunding platforms out there, that we vet these campaigns. We make sure there's impact tied to them, so you can feel safe and secure giving to them, and you can measure the impact. And so HBCUs, when you graduate, you should be giving back, and you should be connected to a cause you care about. And in that, I would love to be a part of that type of movement, in some way, shape, or form. And if not, just creating small giving circles is just as impactful. Creating one that has to do with athletics, a giving circle for HBCU graduates who deeply either were affected by like the same mission that Brandon was talking about, right? Being a leader on and off the court. So now you graduated, you're in a career. Can you give $20 a month, a year to a cause, and then we give it to Brandon's school? Like, this is the type of stuff that we should be doing, and HBCU should definitely have a part in that. And I think that would be one way to be innovative and leverage our community, because I'm going to keep bringing it back to that collective impact and how funding impacts education and beyond, or the lack of funding, rather.
Yeah, I want
Thanks so much.
to.
Go ahead, Brandon. How do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I want to jump on the HBCU train. But first, like any ZCaters, there's a lot of people that's out here protecting this man, and of all ages. So my kids, Aubrey and Blake, they're watching too. So if you got 4 and 6 year old haters, then run up. They could get something too. All right, but back on topic. With HBCUs, Earl Monroe is a graduate of Winston-Salem State University. He was an education major while he was there. He was he was an All-American basketball player as well. And so while he had an athletic ability, he knew that there was something else that he could potentially do. And so he went to school to be an educator. His gifts and his talents on the court allowed him to, continue to play basketball professionally for a long time. But he never gave up on thinking about how to service his community and how to give back. And so we need more of that. We need HBCUs to be that safe space where we can send our young people, where we can send our athletes and let them develop. Over the last few years, I have long been had a different relationship with the NCAA because I felt like they were trying to take advantage at times of athletes, but have been really proud to see the work of folks like Deion Sanders, who's now at Jackson State coaching football, who's really trying to think about, how can we go back and we can rebuild these institutions. Howard University had a game against Notre Dame, a basketball game against Notre Dame this past year on ESPN. Something that I've never seen in my life before, an HBCU playing on ESPN against, a high major school. And so, taking these opportunities to show that from an athletic standpoint, our folks can go to HBCUs, they can compete and they can thrive, but also just like the idea of Earl Monroe, everybody's not going to be an athlete. And so how can we encourage our folks to go to these spaces where they know they'll be loved and they know they'll be taken care of, and they'll get the skills that they need in order to thrive in the professions that they pursue. And so, I went to Chicago State University. I'm a proud Chicagoan. It is not officially an HBCU, but if you step on that campus, you're going to see nothing but Black people. And so, we are always thinking about how we can be in community, how we can build up each other, how we can support one another. And just like Kelly's been saying, just like Zeke's been saying, it's all about funding. It's all about thinking about who poured into you, and then you can pour back into them. One of the people who I know is watching right now, Ms. Vanessa, a long-term mentor and mom of me, and always taught me to train my replacement, right? And so, one of the big things about HBCUs, one of the big things about education is thinking about not just what I can do for myself in the moment, but what am I doing for the people that are coming behind me? Like I talked about Blake and Aubrey, my wife's got them watching on the screen. What is it that they're going to pick up from this conversation and that they're going to be able to act upon, 10 years from now? What are my students at Earl Monroe or at South Bronx Community, where I just left? What is it that I can do to them to establish leadership and be able to think about, how to position them for more post-secondary opportunities? And so always thinking about something that is bigger than yourself. And so I think, that is one of the reasons that I love HBCUs, because it isn't just a school that's in place in order to take your money to give you a piece of paper. It's creating that culture, and it's instilling those values for long-term success, and being able to think about the community as a whole and what it is that we can do to ensure that the community continues to thrive long after we're no longer around.
You better bring in the HBCU connection with Earl Monroe. Yes, I love it. But even in that last statement, because we're wrapping up and we only have about 10 more minutes, and I wish we had more time, because I am so loving connecting with each of you. So I want you to think of, so this last question, we're going to bring it together in this concept of training your replacements, right? Training the trainer, right? All of these concepts that we learned and that were rooted in Philadelphia Freedom Schools, which is where each of us met, right? And so I want you to just kind of talk about, maybe share your last thoughts with the audience, what you want people to remember about this concept of service, right? And being a servant in your community, and leading, and how Freedom School helped us to think and conceptualize this grand vision of freedom for our children, freedom in our schools, freedom of thought, freedom of action, freedom of empathy, even, right? And engaging with our community. So what are the last few thoughts that you want to share with our listeners and our watchers about those ideas? I'm going to start with Isaiah and go around to Brandon.
I'm probably going to steal Brandon's. Brandon and I, we kind of grew up in this movement together. Brandon's actually one of my best friends. And I think one of the things that really shaped my perspective of certain leadership, we used to read it every year, was Dr. King's speech, Drum Major Instinct, and to really understand what Dr. King talked about as far as the concept of, being aware, being conscious, and recognizing how, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, there's a certain level of ego that naturally comes with being a human and doing the work that we do, and to always put yourself in a position to make sure that it doesn't become about you. Brandon is executive director at a school. He's talking to MBA folks, on a consistent basis. It's easy to start focusing on the selfies and, how to get your likes up, and, to try to give the perception that you live an exclusive lifestyle. And the reality is he probably does. But at the end of the day, when you do have access to spaces like that, how do you make sure that there's a fine balance and the focus doesn't become more about the selfie and the access, and it continues to be about the curriculum and the passion that we just heard from Brandon today? That was the core of what Dr. King wanted us to be conscious of when he talked about the drum major instinct. And I'm an East Coast kid, right? So like when I first heard it, I didn't even understand it, because I'm like, what is a drum major, right? Like, I don't even know what we don't know no marching bands in Philly, right? Like, we got marching bands, but not like it is down south, where the drum major is just like, like this very important figure in the marching band. So for me, it took a while to conceptualize the title and how the title applied to the actual speech, because we always read the speech, but I begin to understand, like, how the drum major works, and as it's rolled into the marching band, is really the perfect name for the speech. And if there's one thing I want people to remember, is as you go away and you do this work, Dr. Carr told us the reward for good work is more work. And if you are good at it, it's only natural that you're going to begin to climb the ladder you're going to put yourself in a position where you're going to receive a lot of accolades for the work that you do. So the young people say stay humble. I guess that's the short way of staying it. But when you really studied this work, you begin to try your best to embody what it means to be conscious of the drum major instinct. And my solution to that has always been to surround yourself with quality people, folks who are comfortable pulling your coattail when they feel like you're moving into a space and place that's not in the best interest of us as a collective. I'll stop right there.
I'll definitely echo everything that's been said. I was going to say, the reward for good work is more work, and so that's exactly right. And with that in mind, we all should be trying to train our replacements as well. Most of us, coming out of freedom schools, we are in these dynamic leadership roles in these spaces where we are creating change. We all been instilled the idea of servant leadership, so that's where that humbleness comes from, right? Like, just be humble because we're servant leaders, right? We lead by serving, we lead by example. So we could take on all roles, whether you're leading the school, right, or cleaning the school, whatever that looks like. We can do all roles from the empathy lens. But we're getting older. We have responsibilities, and at this stage, anybody listening out there, no matter what level you are in, you should be thinking about how you're going to start training your replacements, because that's how the cycle goes. It's a cliche saying that youth are the future, but that's definitely a fact that they're the future. And if we're not intentionally pouring into them, trying to train our replacements in some way, that's where we're doomed. And I know we are doing it in our respective spaces, but I would just offer that encouragement to anyone else listening. If you haven't thought about getting a mentor, if you haven't thought about, becoming a part of the school in your radius, like I keep saying, we're going to leverage our community. It takes a village. This is your chance to start training your replacement. Each one, reach one, teach one. All these cliche things are so cliche, but they have so much meaning to them. And if you start applying them like intentionally, you're doing your part in society. And I think that's one thing I will leave everybody with is begin to think about how you can train your replacement. Thank you.
Yeah, Freedom School is a life-changing experience for me. Like the first time I got to sit in a room and listen to Dr. Carr, I didn't want to leave, and it really made me, it upset me that I picked Chicago State and not Howard. And so, I'm jealous of Candace, and I'm jealous of all my friends who actually, who went there and got to sit in these rooms and in these spaces. But, one of the things about Freedom School, like Zeke was saying, like Kelly was saying, it's about the servant leadership mentality. You have to recognize that you bring gifts and you bring talents, but there's something that is bigger, and you need to know when to minimize yourself for the greater good of the collective. And so, what is it that we do for our communities? What is it that we can do for the people that we love? What is it that we do for people who don't know us, but we still are working on behalf of them? Isaiah does that every day as a councilman, where he's, fighting for folks that, love him, fighting for folks that hate him, but fighting to do what he can in order to ensure that the city has everything it needs so that everybody can thrive. And so, a lot of that is, embodied in what Freedom Schools is all about, a life-changing experience. I'm so glad that God allowed me to participate that and meet great folks like you all who are on the call today. But, just really thinking about that connection to these living legends, sitting at their feet and, having them pour into us, and, going back and then doing the work so that, when our time comes, then we can go back and we can have those same conversations to build up the next group that's coming behind us, because these young folks, they're ready, and they're ready to do it better than we ever did it. And I just want to give them the tools and a little bit of insight so that they can thrive in the work that they do.
I'm just going to say Ashe, just because that's what we used to do in Freedom School. To say, yes, I just appreciate all of the wisdom that each of you shared, as young as each of you are, right? And surprisingly, I'm like the old head in the room. I can't even believe it, but not by much. So don't get it twisted. But I just thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you. And please Follow us on all of our social medias. Those people who are in our audience, we appreciate you for joining us this evening. Thank you. And this was MOBE Mondays Independent Education Narrative.
Thank you so much, Kilolo, and to all of our panelists. I'll say a brief quote from the late esteemed President Nelson Mandela, that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. We thank you very much for being change agents. We hope that people in the audience receive this wonderful blessing of information that was shared this evening. We invite you to follow us on MOBE Symposium across all social media platforms, particularly on Facebook, where you can go and check out some of our phenomenal previous broadcasts. You can also find these previous broadcasts on YouTube as well. We will be back close to October, and we wonderfully, happily thank you for joining us this evening. This concludes our MOBE Mondays broadcast. Good evening.